Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, marketing exec by day, AI experimenter by day, night, and basically every other waking moment in between at this point.
And I'm Kyle, your resident tech guru. I've spent the last decade building data systems, products, and AI tools that solve real-world problems. My goal is to cut through the noise and show you how this tech actually works for your business. Each week, we'll break down AI concepts, tools, or trends that actually matter for your business. We'll explain what it is, why you should care, and how to use it without needing a computer science degree.
So whether you're a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or you're just tech curious, grab your coffee, close that tab where you've been staring at ChatGPT for the past 3 weeks wondering what to do with it, and let's dive in. Just think of us as your guides through the wild, wonderful, and sometimes completely overwhelming world of AI.
This is Early Adopter.
Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. So, Jess, tell us about your week.
It's been a very busy work week. Honestly, that's kind of all I've done this week is work. Although I went to the cinema for the first time yesterday in a really long time. I mean, I genuinely can't remember the last time I went. I used to go, on a weekly basis. So it was really nice to go. I went to an Everyman cinema, which I don't know if you ever went to when you were in London.
Love it, man. Okay. I was a premium subscriber.
Yeah. Well, so for our American listeners, Everyman is a very high-end cinema chain in the UK, and it's one of those ones where they've got big comfy sofas and they bring food to you. So
nice.
I didn't love the movie we saw. The movie was not amazing, but the experience was great. So
top-notch experience, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pretty much. How has your week been?
Week was good. Don't have much to report other than this week starts football, American football here in the US. So
clarify American football. Big difference.
I'll try to keep track of that for our international audience. But yeah, American football starting up. So we kicked off on Thursday, and now we've got some games on Sunday. It basically marks when I stop being productive as an individual on Sundays and sometimes on, evenings throughout the week.
What team do you support?
Oh, I'm a Rams fan. Die hard.
Oh.
I almost wore my jersey, but I thought that was a little too obnoxious.
Well, I do know that from what my family tells me, the Seahawks kick off today as well.
From what my family tells me. You've completely disassociated from any American football. I love it.
Well, I mean, I never, ever. The only reason I would ever watch the Super Bowl was for the snacks. It's nothing to do with the actual. Yeah. I think
the commercials.
Even then.
No.
I think the last Super Bowl I was playing Zelda while the game was on, and I just remember I was very stressed because I was like fighting the big boss during the Super Bowl, so it was like a very stressful hour and a half.
Well, when the Rams play in the Super Bowl, I'm probably at that level of stress as well. So
yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Right, so we have an exciting week. This week, we are continuing our talk about data, I should say. And once again, I promise we'll do our best to not make it jargony, but also make it interesting. And we have a guest this week, and I worked with this guest. And if anyone can make data really accessible and really interesting, it is Eric. So without further ado, I'm very excited for us to talk to Eric Callahan. Right. So we are very excited to introduce someone that I used to work with, Eric Callahan. Hi, Eric. Thank you for coming to join us.
Hello. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. Yeah. So, Eric, do you want to give us a little bit of background and why are you the data guy?
Yeah. So I've been in this whole data analytics nonsense for about 15 years or so, probably sort of across the board. I've been very lucky to have a very diverse set of experiences across lots of different ways. When I say diverse, I mean industries, right? I've been able to work in hospitality and nonprofits and banking, lots of diversity as far as marketing analytics, product analytics, and also just I've been able to see sort of the whole spectrum. So I initially concentrated on analytics specifically, and then that turned into BI, and then that turned into predictive modeling before everything was called machine learning. We used to just call things data modeling, right? Statistical models, things like that. And then from there, I got into small startups. And then I had the reality of, oh, like you don't get these nice clean tables given to you everywhere like you do in big corporations. You have to actually go get your own data. So that's when I sort of turned into, I guess, like a real data scientist and sort of had to teach myself data engineering as well. And having the analytics background, it was a little more natural, I guess, because I knew what the point of this was. I would say, here's the pain points as an analytics person. Here's how I need the data, and here's the reason I need it. So let's make sure that these pipelines are designed a certain way, and that we actually are shaping the data and creating it and preparing it in a way that is useful. So yeah, so I've sort of been able to see the problem from lots of different viewpoints. So that's how I got here.
And what I'm really excited about, Eric, with your experience, as you kind of talk about it, is you have that startup experience that you've worked with smaller companies, but you've also worked with huge, massive enterprises. So I think you have a nice kind of combo of experience where you've seen what huge players are doing. You've worked within, like you said, their data sets and the projects they're trying to do, but you also have that startup experience. So I think you can kind of help bridge the gap a little bit between what the big companies are doing and then our audience here, which is, SMBs, owner operators, entrepreneurs, et cetera. So you're definitely the domain expert that we love to have here to talk about some of these data challenges, because data is so key for AI. And I know we're going to talk about kind of AI ready data and what that means.
Eric, because obviously you and I worked together for quite a few years. One of the things that I found really interesting working with some of the enterprise companies that we've worked with in the way that we worked with is that everyone has messy data. It doesn't matter how big you are or how small you are. Everyone's kind of in the same boat. And that's part of what you do is you help everyone get their data into a shape that is usable. But I think that's one thing that I, coming from a smaller business background and then working with these large enterprise, was a little bit of a shock to the system. Is like, oh, it doesn't matter how big or small you are. Everyone's in a mess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people, they start a startup or whatever, and they almost get like a little imposter syndrome. Like, oh, do I really know what I'm doing? Am I able to do this? I don't really know data. And then the truth is actually no one can. And it's for different reasons. I think with enterprises, it's not necessarily because they don't have domain expertise, but they're just because, welcome to corporate America, everything is so siloed and so much of data structuring and making sure that things are working together is communication. And when things are structured and in silos, it's really hard to make sure that everyone's sort of rowing in the same direction when it comes to data structures and data modeling and what the point is of collecting data in the first place and what you're going to do with it. So as Jess said, you make these assumptions maybe that these huge corporations kind of have it all together. They don't. Nobody does.
Before we get started, I do want to say, I think today what we're going to leave with is you're already sitting on useful data. Let's start practical, Eric. A lot of our audience, when I talk to them, says, we don't have enough data. We hear this a lot. What kind of examples do you have where you'd say, hey, you actually have more data than you realize, you just maybe aren't utilizing it or really accessing it the way you should be?
Yeah, it's a funny question because I think one of the ways to think about it is really starting with like, what are questions that you have that you're trying to answer? What do you want to know about your business, right? You don't have to necessarily say, okay, I've got this like system set up and I have these event collectors and I have these listeners and all this stuff. And you don't need like say I've got this huge, database of streaming events and all that stuff. What are you doing? Like, what are you trying to know? Did you start your business on a Google form? Asking people questions about something? If you did, you have data because those people filled that Google form out, right? Did you start your business by making phone calls and trying to figure out like who was and who wasn't interested and writing that down and recording it somewhere? If you did, you have data, right? So I think a lot of people tend to think of data as this like intimidating thing and like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm ready to start and like I don't actually know if I have anything, right? You do. You just maybe you don't think of it that way, but you do. You absolutely do.
Yeah, and I love that where you start with what are the business questions you're trying to answer. Start with what's important specific to your domain, to your expertise, to your product you're selling. As long as you're asking that initial question and then you're collecting information around it, it's great. And I especially think you're spot on that we maybe have gotten used to hearing big data so much that you think it must be this massive collection of information sitting in all of these huge databases. But in fact, sometimes that's overkill for a lot of the businesses and what they need.
Or you think that's all there is, right? That if you don't have big data, you don't have data and it's not useful or worthy, right? Like before 15 years ago, when everyone started talking about big data and everyone started trying to use Hadoop and build these things internally, um, everyone used like Excel for everything, right? And no one had imposter syndrome and said, "Oh, I don't have a Hadoop cluster, so therefore I don't have data." Right?
Right.
Everyone just said, "I have this, and this is what it is, and let's use it." Right? So you can still do that even if you don't have big data, big infrastructure and everything. You still have data.
Think that's something that we would see a lot actually, is that a lot of companies are almost collecting data for the sake of collecting the data, and then they don't actually know what to do with it. So I think that's when it goes back to that business question, like, what is the point of this? Why are we collecting every single thing when actually we probably just need, I don't know, 5 of those things?
Oh yeah. And this is kind of a good parallel to what we're seeing now with AI too a lot. I think that there's a lot of parallels and similarities between what was happening with big data maybe 15 years ago or 10 years ago and what's happening with AI now.
Hmm.
Is that you see a lot of people running to jump and say, like, I've got to do the thing because that's what everyone's doing. And if I don't do this thing, like, I'm going to be left behind, right?
Yeah.
Instead of first thinking back, like, what's the point of this? What are we doing? What are we trying to do? And so you would have people, 10, 15 years ago who would just say, let's start collecting every piece of data possible. Haven't really thought about what your use cases are or what you're going to do with it or how you're going to store it or how you're going to extract it once it's stored. Just kind of like throw it in the closet and shut the door and hope that it doesn't like burst the closet door open, right? And you're seeing similar things, I think, today with AI, right? You have a lot of people and companies who are just saying like, oh, we need LLMs because LLMs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it. That's the extent of their thinking. Yeah, absolutely. Though I think it's a very similar parallel to back then.
Yeah, I mean, I see that a lot where, and sometimes the mandate is coming from the board, but you need to put
Mhm.
AI in, or just you're going to conferences and everyone is talking AI this, AI that. You think to yourself, oh, I got to do something around AI. And so I mean, I've heard multiple times a CEO owner say, how can we use AI for this? Or how can we implement AI? But again, I love you got to start with what's the business question? What are you trying to get out of it? What's your pain point? What are you trying to solve? And then sometimes AI is the right tool for that, but not always. I mean, going back
Yep.
to, talking about your experience, how often do you find that people could probably just be using workflow automations versus actually having to utilize AI?
Yeah, so much. There's so many times, as you said, where people are just like, well, we got to do the thing, right? Because the board said so, or because
Hmm.
we will feel left like FOMO, right? AI FOMO almost
Yeah.
a little bit.
There's a lot of
And it
that.
reminds,
There's so
yeah,
much
there
of
is.
that.
And it reminds me a little of the like, what's the old analogy? Like if every I forgot the analogy, but like if you have a nail, you can just use a hammer, right? You don't need to
Mm.
use like some fancy like
Yeah.
Makita drill and like that has lights and dances, and right? You can just hit it with a hammer. It's fine. Just because you have the other thing doesn't mean you need to use it. So that's what I think we're seeing a lot of. Lots of problems that people can solve with traditional things, right? Even if it's
Hmm.
just a dashboard or maybe just traditional models or even
Hmm.
just basic like SQL queries
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
anything like that, right? But people are saying like, let's just do the AI because we want to. And sometimes like if you want a proof of concept, right? If you say, let's take a problem that we sort of know the answer to and let's try AI just to see if this is going to work. And if it
Mhm.
does, that gives us some information on what does and doesn't work, and we can scale it because we have bigger things in mind. Fine. That makes sense. If you're just saying like, let's do it so we can tell people we're using AI, like, and we don't have to, I'm not sure what the reason is for that.
I think that's something that we tell people, that we've told people to do in the past, is like take something that maybe you
Mhm.
know what the outcome is going to be and use it with AI, and then at least you
Yeah.
kind of know whether or not it's going to work for you. So I think that's actually a really good, useful way to just dip your toe in
Hmm.
rather than
Mhm.
going whole hog, because as we know, that's when it usually goes wrong, is if you dive
Yep.
in before you're
Hmm.
completely ready.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I love the experimentation. I think that's super important for our audience just to kind of get familiar and comfortable. But going back to kind of what we started with, which was your data is everywhere. I think another area where people miss out on a lot of data is customer emails or conversations and meetings that people are doing. I mean, that data also kind of lives everywhere. So One thing that I think we kind of want to talk about is how everything is also like a data process. So you have all of these emails, you have all this information. What are the processes that you should be looking at or thinking about when you're, running through, trying to analyze your information?
Yeah, I think a lot of similarly, I will sound like a broken record by the end of this because I think that the whole like what is the question you're trying to answer or what is the problem you're trying to solve really applies very broadly. It's not just to like AI or anything like that, but what you were saying about just data collection in general, right? Like what do you want to know? So if you want to use the example of customer emails, for example, right? Like sure, like a lot of people don't realize how much data is in there, right? But if you send an email, it's probably because you want someone to do something about it, right? Maybe it's just to read it, but maybe it's that you want them to click it, and maybe it's that you want them to buy something, right? So, so what are the things? Do you want to know all those things? Great. If you only want to know if people bought, then like fine. Let's make sure that in your collection process you have some way to tie the actual act of opening the email to the purchase that happened after that. But maybe you want to know the whole funnel, right? Maybe you want to see like who actually opened it, what was the subject line, where on the email did they click. We need to make sure that you have those event tracking things set up beforehand, because a lot of times, like to be honest, we will see people who, maybe a marketer will have these great ideas and they'll send something out and then go to the analytics team and say, great, like how did this do? What did this person do here? Like how many people clicked this banner? And you say like, oh, well, actually, that sort of tracking wasn't implemented when it was set up. So sort of the measure twice, cut once sort of thing. And so you see that a lot too. You see people will sort of skip that, just take an extra second to think about what we actually want to do. And again, what's the purpose of this? Why are we trying to do this? And making sure that you actually can do the thing, and that you can learn the answer to the question that you have, and that we've, sort of everyone has agreed about how you can actually do that, and that it's all set up and implemented correctly.
I want to kind of point to one thing you said, which I think is really interesting, that probably if you're less familiar with data, you don't think about. But we talk about, you said the customer email, and then you started talking about the actions that people take. It's basically what I'm hearing, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, but it's, you might send one email and that's one data point, but there's all of this complementary or ancillary data around it. So like you put content in that email, but you wanted them to make an action. Well, now you can say, okay, did they follow through with that action? That's also data. Did they respond, or did they do something? Did they open it? Did they click it? There's all of these, I would say like, it's almost like branches off of, you sent an email, but there's all these different branches of types of data that you can get just from that one interaction. And so do you have the processes, the data collection methods to also be looking at all of those branches as well? I think that's a really interesting point.
I think it's about the processes, but I also think that it's knowing that you have to collect that. And I think a lot of tools that you'll use, like just thinking about a pretty basic one like MailChimp, right? They will almost guide you through that process and tell you what you need to collect, but you need to know that you have to do it, because I think a lot of people just don't even, they don't think about the funnel, because, a lot of people might not have a marketing background. That's actually one of the hardest, or the biggest challenges, is actually just knowing, what do I need to collect? But I think that then comes back to your thing about asking what the question is. Like, what do you want to know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So like, and your example, so MailChimp, I mean, I don't know what MailChimp's defaults are or anything. So this is not MailChimp slander, but a lot of tools will give you default options, right? And I'll say this is best practice of what you want to track. But sometimes you might have a specific different question, right? We see this a lot with like product experimentation, where people will, or even marketing experimentation, will say, I really want to know if people scrolled down the email or not, because at the top, there was information, but there was other stuff at the bottom, right? And maybe that sort of stuff is not actually captured. And I think like to make it actually very sort of simple and think about the analogy, forget email for a second. Let's go, 40 years ago, and you've got a mom and pop hardware store, right? And someone's just opening the phone book and making phone calls to people. I know, I'm sorry, I'm super old. So I know, right? So like, let's say someone was opening the phone book and they said, I want to tell the community that I'm out here and I can do whatever, and I exist and I can help them with their problems. You open the phone book, you call, 20 people in the phone book, and then you want to know, like, of these 20 people, like, did they hang up on me? Did they actually have a conversation and say, like, you know what, like, I'm glad to know you're here. I'm good now. I'll keep you in mind. Did they say like, oh my God, my toilet's like overflowing right now. I'm sprinting to your store. Thank God you're here, right? And so it's the same thing, like any sort of marketing, you're doing an action and you want to know like what is the
Hmm.
result of that action and what are the possible things that you want to know, right? And maybe, Bob the plumber has now realized that like, okay, of my 20 people that I called, half of them said like this is great. So like this was worth my time. I should do this more. I should do this again. Same thing. Like you know what it is that you're trying to track, what it is that you want to answer, and that you need to just make sure you're able to record
You've
in your
you've
collection.
just given me terrible flashbacks to when I
Oh
first
God.
started working in PR, and we literally had a spreadsheet of journalists,
Oh yeah.
and we would have to do a ring round and call every single one to see if they received the press release that we sent them.
Oh boy, yeah.
And then obviously, because this was before there was any way of keeping track of it, it was literally an Excel spreadsheet, and we would turn it red if they weren't picking up, or we would turn it
Mhm.
green if they answered the phone, and we would write in our little update or whatever. So like, God, that just gave me traumatic flashbacks.
Sorry about that.
So Eric, I've got a question because what we're kind of hearing is you're not data poor. We're revealing that there are a lot of places that your business is creating data. There's maybe standard default fields that those tools are capturing, but that maybe your data unorganized. Where are some common places that you see where businesses are generating data, but they're likely being ignored or they're underrated, if you will?
Hmm. I think if you're in the digital domain, which is where most of our things are right now, I think a
Hmm.
lot of it is um, basic user interaction with
Hmm.
things. So we talked about
Mm.
marketing a little bit already with like emails and how people are responding and what they're doing, and if you're actually tying those behaviors to the initial thing for attribution, things like that. But
Right.
there's even product things like when people go to your site, are they scrolling down all the way? Are they clicking here or there or the other
Hmm.
place? I think a lot of that stuff is not paid as much attention to as it could be.
Okay.
Um, I think, and within those things, right? Once you set up the tracking on things, both on email side and on product side, that enables you to do lots of experimentation too, all sorts
Mm.
of experimentation, because now that you know that you're able
Yeah.
to see how these people are doing things, now you can do versions. And you say, all right, well, I'm already able to figure out these KPIs. Now I can actually do versions and compare them,
Right.
because I know I've set up this implementation and these tracking sort of infrastructure.
I actually saw a video that is the perfect example of this the other day, because it was a video about social media hooks, and someone was saying they had two identical
Hmm.
videos, but they changed the hook. So, and then they were looking at the analytics for the video, and the one with the stronger hook, people would obviously keep watching for the whole
Uh-huh.
video, whereas the one with the weaker hook, people would scroll by immediately. So it's even things like that. Again, a lot of people just don't know what they should be looking at because there's just so many
Hmm.
options.
I mean, we're on a podcast right now. Like, I don't know if you guys have a catchy jingle at the beginning, but you
Kind
could
of.
try two catchy jingles and
Yeah.
see, like, are more people watching past the
Yeah.
first 5 minutes because of, they can't get
I,
it out of their head?
that's a really good point. Jess, we've basically been going with one jingle. Maybe we
I
need to
know.
Oh,
we need to live by our own ethos and start doing some data
Maybe.
testing. Okay, so we've talked about this data kind of awakening. Eric, to kind of bring this back to our users, you brought up, email attribution, tracking the website. What would you say is maybe like a quick 60-second, 1 minute thing, audit or thing that our audience can do quickly that you think would have kind of prove to them, hey, I actually have data. I just didn't know that I had it. And then which might start them thinking about what to do next.
I think I told you I was going to be a broken record, but sit down and say, what do I want to know right now about my
Mm-hmm.
business that I don't know, that I probably should be able to know?
Hmm.
And then once you stare at that question, think about like how in a perfect world could I get that answer? And I bet
Mm-hmm.
in some cases you're going to say, oh wait, I actually can get that answer. I have it. I just haven't thought about, collecting this a certain way or structuring this a certain way or whatever. And I think that's probably, you know, half the battle right there. Just actually just thinking about it.
I was going to ask Eric to share his wife's PTA story, because I think that that's a really
Oh no. Okay.
interesting use case. So
Hmm.
to give a little bit of background, so when Kyle and I spoke to Eric earlier this week, briefing him on this podcast, you talked about your wife and the fact that your wife is in the PTA and her frustrations with data sources. And I thought that was a really interesting
Yeah.
thing, because that's actually something that
Mhm.
a business owner or a founder can actually probably really empathize with, but also that's
Yeah.
something that you can standardize pretty easily, and it will make someone's life easier.
This is very like it's funny because I actually had used this example. I did a talk a year ago or so, and I called it like data engineering for normal people.
Yeah.
And the thought was that I
Love
thought
that.
that there's a ton of like there's a ton of processes and things that exist just in our everyday world that like really could be considered data engineering, or like if we thought about them for like a minute, we would realize that there's data engineering component here that we can try to optimize. And this was like the perfect example of a frustrating thing, right? So the example that I had talked to Jess and Kyle about before was there's a barbecue, right? Welcome back to school, whatever. I was chosen to grill hot dogs. I'm very proud of this. But we need to know how many hot dogs are we buying, right? So there was an RSVP component here, and we needed to know how many people were coming. And so someone on the PA, probably my wife, came up with a Google form for distribution for people to RSVP. Someone else on the PA trying to help, right? Said like,
Mhm.
oh, like what if we also put a slip in the children's folders and give them to the teachers to hand out to them, so you can also fill out the slip and send it back in. And then someone else said, oh, and also we have a Gmail address for the PTA. So if anyone wants to just email to this thing, then great. Like now you can RSVP that way too. Again, like bless their hearts, right? I think that's a thing. And if we have any Southern listeners here, I'm sorry if that's appropriating, but um, they
Southern
were, I mean,
appropriation.
that's right. What they were trying to do was make it easier for everyone, but what they did to themselves was make their lives much harder, right? Because
Mhm.
now instead of the original Google form where you would just go into the backend Excel sheet and count the hot dogs and order the hot dogs, now you had to say, okay, someone needs to, like, how are we getting these forms back? These little slips of paper that were in
Mhm.
the folder, like, do we actually know how we're getting them back? And then once we do, how are we, like, was there a thing on here that said like how many people are coming? How many hot dogs do you need? And then who's counting this, like, manually, right? And then who is checking the emails, right?
Hmm.
To make sure if someone emails back and says like, oh, hi, I'm
Yeah.
Judy, I would love to come to the barbecue, right? Great. Do we have dupes? Do we have people who filled out the form and then also filled out the slip because they didn't know they were supposed to only do one? I don't think there's user IDs here that we can that we can
Oh, you're
dedupe
giving
on,
me so many
right?
headaches thinking like how this relates to data challenges in businesses.
Well, it's the
Deduplication.
same exact thing, right? So the point here is that this was the perfect example for data engineering for normal people, because this is like a normal person problem. Like, let's have a
Mhm.
barbecue for the kids, right? This should not be like causing like data engineering headaches, but it absolutely did,
Yeah.
because everything is data, right?
It's a great example. And I think through like all of the different instances of how this matters with business systems, there's the deduplication issue. There's, okay, data exists now in this unstructured format over an email. How do you convert that back to maybe the Google Sheet, back into structured data? So how do I get it into something that looks like everything else so I can do analysis on it? Then you've got this second system. I forget what it was, the Google Forms, email, and then you had
Piece of paper, a literal piece of paper.
literal pieces of
Yes,
paper. I mean, oh my gosh,
yes, yes, a literal piece of paper. You tear it off. You write with a pen or a
uh,
pencil, or a
the
crayon. Like, yeah,
the source of
Crayon.
my
right. It's
nightmares.
elementary school.
Yes, but you have all of these different siloed data sources in different types of structures of data. How do you then get it into one consistent system so that you can answer how many hot dogs do you need? How many people are coming?
Right.
And I think this, you have a very simple question: how many hot dogs do I need? But now you've created this huge headache of all these different types of data in different places. How do you bring it all together in something that's usable? I mean, that is a universal challenge in every business. I'm sure every person that is listening to this, whether a data expert or not, has gone through something like this within their business, or trying to plan the barbecue.
I mean, it's funny because like when we open talking about enterprises and how like they've got all these silos and it's so hard to communicate when you've got 10,000 people.
Mhm.
This is like 5 people that
Right.
we're talking about that where this can happen. So like this is kind of what happened. Like,
Yeah.
the point, I guess, is saying that like before any sort of process is
Mhm.
launched, and like, yes, apparently counting hot dogs like is a process. Like, we all need to just sit down and be like, all right, like what's the question we're trying to answer? Tell me if you've heard that before. Right. The question we're trying to answer is how many hot dogs do we,
Yeah.
and like, what is the way we're going to get this answer?
Mhm.
And let's all agree on it and have like one process. And
Yeah.
then it's easy, right? Like from there, like you just highlight the cells on the back of the Google sheet and it says 246 and you're like, okay, I'm done. There's
Yeah.
no headaches. There's no
Well, you still have the headache of 6 hot dogs to a package and 8 hot dog buns to a package. You gotta
Well,
do some math there.
that's
Oh, look.
the endless
classic.
conundrum. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's right.
But
We'll get
actually,
there. We're it's above my pay grade.
I just want to relate it back to business quickly because
Okay.
this is actually a problem that, Eric, I don't think you worked on this project, but when I first started at our previous company, one of the big projects that we had was for a big multinational corporation, and it was one of the businesses that sat underneath them, and they had started this business relatively quickly. Like it was in reaction to something else, and one of the big issues that we were brought in to help was cleaning up their data, because what was happening is there would be an issue at the top of the process where someone would manually enter in the name of something and they would misspell it, or there would be like a space, or because they had the option to type it in and they weren't doing it intentionally, but they just made a mistake. And then all the way down at the bottom of the process was their poor data analyst, who was then having to go in and clean that data up manually. And it was adding like 10 hours onto her work stream every week. So the hot dog story is amazing and it's a really good parallel. But just to bring it back to the business side of things, making a small mistake at the top of the business process can have a massive knock-on effect when you have the data that you're trying to use at the end of the process. And then when you add AI into that mix, and then you're taking that data at the end of the process and inputting it into an AI or using machine learning, then it's going to give you terrible results. So it is actually like, it's a silly story, but actually it's so indicative of what happens even at the biggest, highest levels of enterprise.
It's the same exact thing, I think, honestly, as the hot dog story. Like you just said the hot dog story again. I do some advising for startups. And one of the things that I have been telling them a lot lately is that, and like to your point, Jess, about the company that needed to spin up quickly in reaction to something, like that's all startups, right? You have a problem, you want to solve it. You need to get revenue, right? You need to pay your people like right out of the bat. So you're just trying to figure out, how do I launch something as quickly as possible? And like, I get it. I understand that. Take 5 extra minutes and just think to yourself, like, is there something that I'm doing that I'm going to kick myself for in 6 months? Yeah. Or is there something that I can just do like a little differently now and thank myself in 6 months? Right. Yeah. And that's like a great example, right? I know like the company just launched, like, what if you had some sort of like text field checker or something to make sure that like, you didn't have this problem later on, or something somewhere in the process or maybe you just assign unique IDs or something instead, or something like that, right? Something pretty basic that is going to prevent these downstream headaches, because everything that's created is now a created data point and that exists in the world, and now you have to deal with it. Yeah. So if it's messy, like we have to deal with that. And that means your dashboards have to deal with that, and your machine learning models have to deal with that, and your AI and your LLMs have to deal with that.
And all those downstream applications are going to amplify those errors or those issues. Yeah. So I love that. How do you take an extra 5 minutes to really think through your process? And I'm going to give a stat that kind of brings this home, why you probably need to think about your processes up front. Okta, which is a very prominent security firm, they deal with a lot of authentication for applications. They released a report in 2025 saying that your average SMB, small to medium-sized business, runs about 58 applications on average. Now, this is everything from email to your CRM to your accounting system to probably a lot of things that are hidden necessarily to different parts of the organization. And then enterprises have even much more than this. If you don't start to think about your processes up front, the data you're trying to capture, your data quality issues like that text field thing you mentioned, if you don't think about this up front, all of those data quality issues are going to just expound and really get amplified and amplify those downstream changes as well. So we know that this is a big issue because we know there's a lot of different applications. But in order to try to fix it or address it, Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about what shift left methodology is and why it matters in kind of this conversation about data?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to give credit to Chad Sanderson and the folks at Gable, which is a data contracts startup. And data contracts, for if anyone hasn't heard the term. So the idea usually here is software developers and data teams, right? So you think of software developers as usually the people who are creating a data point, right? So if you're a software developer, you're saying like, here's the event that's going to fire, and here are the properties on that event. So if I click through to the website, now there's a click-through event that's been created, and on the click-through event, it says what was the email address of the person who clicked through, what was like the time or the day that they clicked through it. Maybe like what was it from Gmail or was it from something else? Maybe we have information about their name or any demographics, or maybe we can even tie it to like have they bought something before? Are they an existing customer? That's the data point that's now been created that exists. And that is now what the data team has to deal with, for better or for worse. In a good scenario, that's a data point that's easily consumable, and the data team can now say like, all right, this is nice and clean. But now I have this, I can turn this into analytics downstream using some sort of, analytics engineering tool. And now I have nice metrics, right? And they go to do a dashboard, and the CEO sees it and they say, okay, great. I know that, of the emails that we sent, half of them turned into a click downstream. Great. Now a product owner comes in, and the next day they say, what would be great would be if we actually added something else and we have a new feature now. So when they click through the email, they also will go to either like the red site or the blue site, because we're going to test something different. And like, great, that's smart from a product perspective. Let's see if we can improve something, make it better. So they put in the request to the software developer. The developer says, all right, cool, I'm going to add a new field here, and it's called landing page color or something like that, right? And they do that, and then the next day the CEO wakes up and the dashboard's broken. Why is the dashboard broken? The dashboard's broken because all of this whole stream that was set up before was based on the data coming in a certain way. And so the concept of data contracts is basically that there would be communication between software developers and the downstream consumers of the data. And the software developers are not trying to break anything. It's just that no one's really thinking that, this thing is going to affect this thing. And then what happens when the CEO comes in and the dashboard's broken? Whose fault is it? It's not the product managers who gets yelled at. It's the data team, right? It's the data people. And as your example before of 58 connected systems or whatever, that's actually great. I think with the modern data stack now, everything does kind of talk to each other. We have active metadata like through a whole stream, whereas 10 years ago or something before the modern data stack, you'd have 58 siloed systems, and it would be someone's job to manually tie these all together in code. So it's definitely great that we have this, but it does expose these things and open up these new potential problems. And so the idea of shift left basically is to say, all right, when the CEO comes in and they say the dashboard's broken, what happens? Well, it goes to the dashboard team and the BI team. And the BI team says like, oh, well, I don't see anything different in the code. Like, I'm not sure what's going on. Let me go back to the analytics engineering team or whatever. And they say like, oh, okay. Well, I see that there's a new thing coming in from the raw data. I'm not sure where that came from or why it is, but that's why this isn't working. So that's why your dashboard's not working. So let me open a ticket with software engineering. And the software engineering is like, oh yeah, we have this new thing, and it's because of this request we got from product, right? So you just went through like 4 different people. This probably took 2 days to troubleshoot and get to the bottom of. And so by the concept of shift left is like, let's just have this conversation first at the point of the data creation. And like the parallel here, right? The data creation is here, the software developer is the same as the person who's filling out the manual form saying how many hot dogs they want, right? That's the data creation point. And that breaks things downstream. So yeah, so shift left, if any listeners are interested, shift left manifesto is something that Chad wrote. You can find it on Substack. It has like really great, really delves really well into this and this thinking, which I think is like a place we all need to be thinking in the future. Near future.
So back to thinking about what's your 5 minutes that you spend up front, utilizing this shift left methodology. You definitely are probably a little more siloed than you realize. Your domains, that product manager, software developer, BI team is probably more disconnected than ever, or maybe not than ever, but it's still more disconnected than you would anticipate. So definitely, I think the manifesto would be really useful for people to start thinking about what are the downstream implications. Because what you don't want, that nightmare scenario that you talk about with the CEO seeing the dashboard's dead, what you don't want is all of a sudden then that CEO to lose trust in the system and say, oh, well, my dashboard broke. It must all be broken.
Yep. Yeah. I didn't even say that. But that's exactly right. Like I should have said that. You said it for me. Thank you. That's the whole point of this, right?
Yeah.
Is that like not only did your data team waste 2 days, troubleshooting something that had nothing to do with them,
Mhm.
But also, yeah, the CEO is just like, well, I guess I can't believe anything from them.
Now let's actually scale that back to someone who might not have a data team or a BI team, and I'm actually going to ring the jargon buzzer right now, and I think we
Yeah.
need to explain.
She does that
Eric,
to me a lot, Eric.
we have it. I'm starting to call it the jargon buzzer.
Yeah, it's like a
But
swear jar.
basically,
I get it.
what is BI?
BI is business intelligence,
Yes,
dashboards, anything that you just look at. Any analyst would be able to just log in, or
Mhm.
even a non-data person. It's the things that the data team produce for
Right.
product people and marketing people and people who are running the business.
thank you. Okay, so
Yeah.
now that we've clarified that jargon, but let's scale it back, because a lot of our audience is not going to be someone or be people who have a big team
Mhm.
working underneath them. So what does this look like from a 1, 2, 3 person team? And I actually think that it's exactly the same. It's just thinking about it, how it affects yourself, because obviously if you're, a one man woman band, what you do is going to affect what happens further on down the stream.
Yeah, it's funny actually. One of the startups I advised less than a week ago, I was on a conversation with the founder, who is a it's one 2 person company right now,
Mhm.
and they had a event tracking tool, and it's got its own dashboards in it. Um, and he was seeing something that looked a little weird, and he couldn't understand. And he said, "Well, I know for a fact that I had 3 people sign up today, and on my dashboard it says that there's 0 people who have signed up or whatever."
Mhm.
So we went back through and looked through all the events and realized that there was actually a little bit of a disconnect between the definition of what on the dashboard, the event that was populated there was not actually if they had signed up. It was a different event that he
Mhm.
had assumed was the same as the person signing up. And so by digging a little bit into that, we found, what, actually, there's another step in between there. And him, as the CEO who knows the product and knew the intent of the product,
Right.
said, oh, like I assumed that if they did this first event, which is the sign up, that like you can't not do the thing after you sign up. And then we realized actually there was a gap, and he needed to talk a little bit to the people who designed it to real, so that
Yeah.
being
I
said,
was
like
going to say
you have the same problem.
the users will always find a way to break the product.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it doesn't matter if you're 1 person or 1,000 people, it's the
Yeah.
same exact thing.
So, Eric, let me go back to that. Thinking about it proactively for the audience, what's like, let's say they're looking at event tracking, or maybe in a sales context with conversion. What would be kind of the thought process, or maybe a methodology that you could go through and think, okay, I want to see what my conversion is going to be, like if someone books a meeting, or I want to see if someone books an event, or whatever the event trigger is that you're looking at. What's the kind of framework that maybe they should think of up front? Like, what should they start thinking about in regards to how they would be able to be able to measure the outcome that they're looking for?
I think a lot of it's about understanding the process, and maybe this may be jargony too, sorry, Jess, but I like to talk about the life cycle of a data point, or the life cycle of an event, right?
Mhm.
But not necessarily of an event, but of a process. So if you want a sale, right? How does a sale occur? If you're going to start with an email, let's use that as an example, right?
Mhm.
You send the email, the person opens the email, you read the email, they decide, okay, I'm going to click this.
Mhm.
They click the email. Once they click the email, it goes to the landing page. Once they're on the landing page, they have to read it. They have to then decide, like, okay, I want to buy the thing,
Mhm.
or I want to research, or whatever they can do there. Like they have to do something on the page, whatever their process is on the page to get to the point of sale. Then they have to add the thing to their cart.
Mhm.
Then they have to hit pay, and then they have to hit complete my order, or whatever it is, right? So that's like 10 things I just said. So you got to track all those if you want to know in
Yeah.
your funnel, like where people
Mm.
are maybe dropping off, or whatever. And you have to be able to track individual users and know what is the order of things that they're doing. And if there's something on there that they can do that you're not tracking, and it's going to cause confusion to you, and
Mhm.
then you need to make sure that you're starting to track it, right? So that you can know, oh, they dropped off here because they got distracted because I had a big blinking light up here about like another sale, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that. But you need to know that, right? Because otherwise you're going to say, oh, well, they just got disinterested here. Well, no, they didn't. They just wanted your other thing instead because it took their attention away. So really, I think in general, it's just thinking about like, what is the process that a person has to
Mhm.
go through in order for them to do your desired action?
Yeah. Basically, just to bring this home. So it's really, I mean, you should be experiencing your product, your experience. What is the experience that your user is going to go through? You should run through that
Mhm.
yourself. I mean, this is also like classic product when you're building. Like you need to test the product, test the process, make sure it works, and then see that you can track every event that you want to be looking at yourself? Did it actually do those 10 things? And can you see that?
I would
Yep,
actually add
absolutely.
something else to that. And I would
Mhm.
say have someone who doesn't know the product run through your
Yeah.
process, because you know exactly what steps you should be going through. So you're going to do it automatically. Whereas someone who doesn't know what they're doing
Yep.
is going to find that
Yeah.
edge case, like that weird thing that popped up with your startup, because he didn't think that there was a step in between, and it turned out
Yeah.
there is a step in between. So you doing it
Right.
yourself is
Mhm.
helpful, but not necessarily the most helpful, whereas having someone who doesn't know anything about it is actually probably
Yeah,
quite useful.
they will be able to break it much faster than you will.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's talk about some practical next steps and some takeaways for our users. We talk about this shift left methodology. Eric, why don't you bring it home for us? What's something that people can do now that, 5 minutes today that saves them lots and lots of time down the road?
I mean, one of the things I think you can do is say to yourself, are there data things that I'm doing a lot, sort of right before a dashboard or something like that? Are there places where I'm cleaning this same thing over and over and over? And then thinking to yourself, is there a way that I can just prevent this in the first place?
Hmm.
Just identifying pain points, because again, we're not doing this like for fun necessarily. It's
Hmm.
usually because there's some sort of pain point or some sort of process we want to make more efficient. So, are there things that are constantly giving you headaches when you're trying to create dashboards or you're trying to make models or anything like that? And is there a way you can sort of prevent those problems um,
Hmm.
from being created in the first place, rather than having to fix them all the time?
Right. Yeah, and I think that shift left thinking becomes even more critical with AI. You need to fix the data before you start adding intelligence. What are some ways that our audience can start thinking about data collection and processes? What are some of the steps today that you can take that would, may not see the ROI today, but will have outsized returns down the
Yeah, I think just thinking like, what am I going to do with this? I'm collecting this for some reason, probably, right?
road?
If you're collecting it just for the sake of collecting it, then it's going to be hard to answer that question. But if you know,
Hmm.
like, sort of, what do I want to do with this? Am I collecting, customer name here because I want to make sure that I am
Hmm.
uh, unifying user data downstream? Then you can think of, all right, how do I make sure that I'm collecting this in a way that is uniform across all the different places I'm collecting it? Examples like that. Really, just
Hmm.
thinking about what am I going to do with this, and am I collecting it in a way that will make it easy to do what I want to do with this later?
Amazing. Yeah. And I think also, if you think about what you're trying to collect, run through that process, the 10 steps that got you where you wanted to
Mm.
go. Start from the beginning when you first do that email interaction all the way to the purchase. Walk through those 10 steps and make sure that you're collecting the data in the way you want to. You're getting all the data and it's being collected. You're not missing anything.
That was part one of our interview with Eric Callahan. We'll be continuing our interview with him next week, so stay tuned. Right. It is time for AI news of the week, and we are going to quickly catch you up on three major AI developments this week. It's a lot. We're going to try and do these quickly, so we'll. What can I say? It's so hard to keep up with the pace of this. Pretty much every day there's a really major announcement, and so we have to sift through a
Totally.
lot. So we've got three this week. And first up, we kind of talked about this a couple of months ago when it happened, which I think was in June, but this is the follow up. And the AI industry just got its first massive copyright reality check. So
Hmm.
Anthropic, the parent company behind our favorite Claude, has agreed to pay at least 1.5 billion to settle a lawsuit with authors who claimed that the company illegally used their books to train AI models.
Billion with a B for
Billion with
sure.
a B. Yep.
That is a lot of money.
It
And
is a lot.
it's not just any settlement. If approved, this would be the largest copyright recovery in US history. So that's about $3,000 per book for an estimated 500,000 works.
So here's what actually happened. Authors sued Anthropic because Anthropic didn't buy the books to train Claude initially. They used pirated copies from sites like Library Genesis. And this, when it happened back in June, the judge ruled that using the books to train the AI is fair use under copyright law. Now, this was a little bit of a controversial decision when it happened anyway, but
Mhm.
There's nothing we can do about that. That is what the judge decided. But the big caveat to his decision is that getting them from pirated sites was a big no-no. So that was the kind of
Mhm.
follow on, and that's what this part of the case was all about.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it comes at a time, or this settlement comes at a time when AI companies are starting to actually do the right thing. So we're seeing a
Yeah.
lot of instances of that. OpenAI signed licensing deals with publishers like The Atlantic. I think they also did one with Vox Media, the Financial Times.
Yeah.
Google has partnerships with major news organizations for getting some of their training data. So, these are we're starting to see proper compensation agreements, which is good.
Yeah, and that's definitely going to be the path forward. So paying your content creators fairly instead of just scraping everything. Scraping is what Perplexity
Mhm.
got in trouble for a couple of weeks ago as well. But the problem is that a lot of this stuff has already happened retroactively, right? Like all of the training
Mhm.
happened years
Mhm.
ago. And so that's kind of where this came about. So there's definitely a path forward for compensation, but the problem is that we have to kind of go back in time and look at when the
Mhm.
LLMs were originally trained. And if this had gone ahead as a class action lawsuit, it would have been the biggest class action lawsuit of all time. So like that is the
Yeah.
scale of it.
But
Yes.
the other interesting tidbit around this timing is that they just raised $13.5 billion in a Series F fundraising, valuing them at over $183 billion. So they are getting a huge infusion of cash. Now, obviously, quite a bit of that is going out the door, but but they're also earning $500 million a year from Claude Code, and they have people paying significant amounts of money.
And I think from a small business perspective or from a startup perspective, what this means is that the AI tools are probably about to get much more expensive, which is kind of a trend that we've been seeing anyway. We've already been seeing it with
Hmm.
ChatGPT and everything. Everyone's starting to raise their prices anyway. But this is probably going to become even
Yeah.
more than we had initially anticipated.
Yeah, if ChatGPT Plus costs $20 a month,
No,
and OpenAI has started paying billions in licensing fees and settlements, Claude is now doing the same. Once they burn through all that VC cash, where is that money going to come from? It's going to basically come from us, the users.
absolutely. And it
Hmm.
probably means that it's going to increase the likelihood of advertising, which is something that we talk a fair bit about. Anyway, we're already starting to see OpenAI making some moves in that direction.
Yeah, I think with all of the VC money that's come in, it's created kind of a little bit of monopolistic
Yeah,
viewpoints, right, around
100%.
the players that we know. But now with having to pay for content, which again, we is a good thing, right? People should be paying for content appropriately. But that being said, it's going to probably further enhance that monopolistic market dynamics. We're already starting to see that more limitations, paying for higher premiums. That free lunch era of AI training is probably over, right? And so that bill is going to come to your monthly subscription. So more now than ever, when we talk about which ones you should be choosing carefully, that's probably going to be really true moving forward.
Yeah. And so if you're using some AI tools that currently work for you or
Hmm.
work for your business, I think probably our biggest piece of advice is to try and lock in that annual pricing
Hmm.
if they offer it. So pay for it for the next year in advance, and that way you kind of beat
Yeah.
that any potential price raise. And unfortunately, you got to start budgeting for, I don't know, 30 to 50% price increases over the next 18 months. We're definitely going to start to see price increasing. There's just
It's
no doubt about that.
it's gonna be like Netflix. When I first signed up for Netflix,
Yeah.
it was that
Oh,
$6.99, and now I'm
God. Do you
paying
remember that?
24.99. The
Oh
good old
God, the
days.
good old days of Netflix. and and actually this moves on quite nicely to our next story, which I think we can safely assume the two are related.
Hmm.
Because speaking of Anthropic, they're going to be making some major changes to how they handle your data. This is absolutely something that anyone who uses Claude should be very aware of. And you have until the 28th of September to decide whether or not you're going to opt in or opt out.
So previously, Anthropic didn't use our conversations with Claude to train their AI models. That was actually a really big selling point and something we talked about a lot, and was one of the major reasons why we championed them over OpenAI and some other alternatives. But unfortunately, that seems to now be changing.
Yeah. So now they want to use your chats to improve Claude. So this is something that a lot of the LLMs do. This is definitely something that ChatGPT does. In fact, I was dealing with some very sensitive data with my pro account the other day, and I intentionally went in and switched off there is literally just a switch that says use my training data for ChatGPT, and I had to make sure that that switch was turned off. You can opt out of Claude's training data, but the catch is that data retention jumps from 30 days to 5 years if you let them agree to use your conversation. So that means that they are keeping that conversation that you've had for 5 years, which is a really long time.
But I think you're spot on to make the connection between the copyright and having to pay for that content, and now going back on their privacy policy, because where is the best training data that they can get? It's from all of the user conversations
from the users.
and everything we're giving it. So clearly this is a economic driven decision. But I think the sneaky part about this is new users get to choose during sign up. So you'll be able to say, yes, I want to opt in, or I'll opt out. But all of us existing users are going to get a pop-up with a big black accept button and a tiny toggle switch that's automatically set to on for data sharing. So, the always on or you gotta have to opt out is a little sneaky.
It's really sneaky. That's a very sneaky UX marketing thing that you do. It's like when you're trying to cancel something and they're like, "Are you sure you want to cancel? Are you really sure you want to cancel?" And they pre-select the don't cancel for you. So it's a sneaky UX thing. But I think bear in mind that you've got until the end of September to make a decision about this. So our suggestion would be if you use Claude, go to claude.ai, check your privacy settings before September 28th. And this actually only affects the personal Claude accounts. Business accounts will still have the same privacy protection. So that is actually a very important distinction. But, be aware that you can opt out. You just have to be very intentional about doing it.
Yeah. And I think the important bit to think about, this is already true for OpenAI. It's getting true for Claude. This is probably where the rest of the industry is heading to.
100%. 100%.
Okay. Well, our third story is quite a bit more serious. And I know we had felt like this was pretty dark and, we were kind of holding off a little bit, but I think it's important to note and something to cover. OpenAI is finally rolling out parental controls for ChatGPT within the next month. And the timing is really unfortunate, but, not a coincidence.
Yeah, so this actually comes after the family of a teenager filed a wrongful death lawsuit against OpenAI because, and you may have read about this in the news, and again, this is so grim and sad and awful. But the family alleges that ChatGPT helped their son plan his suicide, and it's unfortunately too little too late. But
yeah, I had a really hard time reading this story. Some of the details I skipped over because it was just really disturbing. But the new parental controls will let parents link their accounts to their teen's account, manage how ChatGPT responds, disable features like memory and chat history. And I think this part is important. Receive notifications when the system detects their teen is in acute distress.
Yeah, and OpenAI is also going to be routing sensitive conversations to their reasoning models like GPT-5, which we've talked about before. Their GPT-5, according to OpenAI, follows safety guidelines more consistently.
Yeah, look, as far as parental controls go, it's not unlike things that are in other systems and other safety guidelines to protect very sensitive content being shown to minors. So maybe it seems like a lot, but it's pretty consistent. But I think the key business insight that comes from this very tragic situation is, and kind of what you're pointing to, Jess, is OpenAI admitted that their safety measures can degrade in long conversations. So the longer you chat with ChatGPT, the less reliable the guardrails become.
Yeah, and I think this is, again, something that they don't necessarily talk about openly. So maybe this is, if you've got employees that use ChatGPT heavily for customer service or, really anything, you should probably set up some usage guidelines, which is absolutely something that we talk about anyway. Like, I don't think we want to make, a connection between this incredible tragedy and a
Mhm.
business use case. But like with any platform, especially one that's probably going to start advertising soon, there are going to have to be some very strict guidelines and guardrails in place. And you should probably
Mhm.
set them yourself for any employees beforehand. Um, and, as we've said endlessly, these tools are not therapists, even though they feel like ones. They're pattern recognition tools. That is
Yeah.
all. They're not magic.
Yeah, they're very good at mimicking
Yeah,
conversations. That's what
exactly.
feels real, but again, pattern recognition.
Yeah.
And I think to kind of the last takeaway, as we talk about often, you need that human oversight. Make sure that you have human oversight to AI and you build in
Yeah.
those proper guardrails.
Yeah. Okay. God, that is a truly
Tough.
awful story. I'm so sad that we even had to have that conversation.
I
But
know.
let's let's move on to AI gone wrong. So speaking of human oversight or lack thereof, um, let's dive into this week's AI gone wrong, where YouTube has decided to play editor without asking permission.
Yeah, so YouTube has been secretly using AI to edit creators' videos for a month without telling them.
Like the creators feel very strongly about this, as they quite rightly should. So there's one music creator who has over 5 million subscribers, and he started noticing that something was off. And he basically noticed that his hair looked weird. And the closer that he looked, it looked like he was wearing makeup. Which, if you've ever used a filter on TikTok or something, then you know exactly what he's talking about. You can tell. They're very
You
good,
can
but you can
tell,
still tell. Yeah.
but it's also kind of weird when you see it. So you're like, wait, what's happening there,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Another creator, this was an interesting one. Another creator, Rhett Schul, posted a video showing the same content on YouTube versus Instagram. And the YouTube Shorts version looked smoothened with what he called an oil painting effect on his face.
So YouTube did actually respond to this, and they said that they are running an experiment on select YouTube Shorts. And I think that that's interesting to notice that they claim it's Shorts only, that uses traditional machine learning technology to unblur and improve clarity. They're calling it experiment, but again, they never ask for consent, and that's part of the problem. Like when you use TikTok and you intentionally choose to put a filter on, some people don't want a filter on. So I think that that's the key thing, is that they need to offer the creator the option to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. But
Yeah.
obviously, it's not good from a transparency angle. Like, look, maybe I looked better with a little bit of denoising and a little bit of makeup touch up. But I would certainly like to know or be told in advance that you're doing it to me.
Well, even if you have like a Google Meet call, they have that feature, but you can
I
choose to
100%
turn
have
it
turned
on.
that on in Zoom. 100%.
Me too, especially on a day when you don't get a lot of sleep or something, or you're jet lagged. But I choose to turn that on or off. I don't choose to, you don't have that choice in this.
I think the business lesson is this is what happens when platforms prioritize engagement metrics over creative trust or creator trust and transparency.
Yeah.
So if YouTube is experimenting, thinking that slightly sharper videos will perform better, but they're making the change without asking, you're going to alienate your users, which is never a good thing.
This is really important if you know anything about the creator economy, which is an enormous, enormous business at this point in time. Their whole thing is authenticity and the trust that they have with their audience. And so when you have the platform come in and essentially make a decision without the creator's knowledge, that's actually that has the potential to affect their relationship with their audience, which for them is everything. So it's actually a really big issue from a creator perspective. So I think from a business perspective, for anyone who is using video content, which should be everyone, you definitely should all be using it. It's just something to be aware of. It's something that they'll probably have to now give the option, given the backlash against this. But it's just something to be aware of, that YouTube could be changing your content without your consent.
And look, I mean, when I do my makeup videos, I want to make sure that I'm giving my proper, authentic, get ready with me style thing. I joke about it, but seriously,
you laugh, but actually for a lot of people, it's important, because I think it promotes really unrealistic expectations. If you see everyone with perfect, flawless skin, when actually everyone's got, texture in your skin or whatever. And it's a really noticeable difference when users turn on and turn the filters on and off. So
Yeah,
Anyway,
but and also to your point with the creator, the authenticity, if
yeah,
I'm
that
there
is
showing how
key for them.
makeup is good for my skin, but then I'm using a filter on the other side. I mean,
Yeah,
people are crazy on the internet. They will dox you for that, right? If you're like not being authentic with what you're
yeah,
showing. So this is like potentially harming, creators' reputation. So it is something to take seriously. Um,
100%.
you know, hopefully this we might use AI to edit your videos without telling you does not become an acceptable norm for YouTube and they backtrack very quickly.
Yeah, we can only hope.
All right. Well, that wraps up another episode of Early Adopter. So if you made it through Eric's data masterclass, I think you're already ahead of 90% of business owners when it comes to AI readiness. You're really getting an expert here talking about how to get your data and what to do with it.
100%. And seriously, just go and audit one data source this week. Pick the messiest one and apply that 5-minute rule that Eric talked about. And your
Mhm.
future self will definitely thank you because it's going to make your life so much easier.
And if you're looking for more early adopter than just your once a week podcast, we are doing more than just this. So you can find us on social media. We are, doing YouTube shorts where we get some good
We
stuff that
sure are. We
our
even
little.
we even had a TikTok video go semi-viral this week, which was wild to experience. I've never had a viral video before.
Of course, it was about Taco Bell of
It
all
was the
things.
Taco Bell story. It was the Taco Bell story, but I was not expecting it to go so crazy. So it was
turns
a
out
wild experience.
it turns out our occasional rants about companies doing AI wrong are, viral
Very
sensations.
popular. Yeah,
Hmm.
totally. Right. So speaking of social media, we are at early_adopter on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Remember, no E in the adopter because we're just cool like that.
So cool. The
Yeah.
coolest. And then, YouTube is where we post extended clips and bonus content. So stuff that doesn't make it into these episodes, if it doesn't fit in, but we
Yeah.
think it's, relevant and useful, we'll post that on YouTube. So definitely go over there and subscribe so you don't miss anything.
Absolutely. And speaking of subscribe, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your podcast player of choice and leave us a review. It does a 5-star review, I should say. It does really make a difference for
Hmm.
people to find us.
If
So,
you're not, because if you're not subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for. Like
I
you're
mean,
missing out.
seriously, that's so true. Anyway, until next week, keep experimenting, keep learning, and remember the best time to fix your data was yesterday, but the second best time is today.
Absolutely. So this has been Early Adopter. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Jess. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next week.
Bye,
Bye,
Jess.
Kyle.